Good morning. Welcome to Who's Left This Week, the unapologetically progressive Sunday morning political news show for Indiana. Our opening theme song is by Hoosier singer-songwriter Leslie Nuss, and my name is Scott Aaron Rogers. I'm broadcasting from Bloomington. This week, and I promise the show isn't a repeat, we just live in hell. ICE is out of control again. The U.S. and Iran are on the brink of all-out war again. President Trump pushes election conspiracies again, and Indiana's state government is populated by corrupt racists. Again? Still? All of that and more. But before we begin, you know the drill. This is an independent media project. We don't paywall content. We don't have billionaire benefactors. Only individuals like you keep this thing going. Who's Left and the Progressive Indiana Network refuse to hide important information behind paywalls in the middle of a political crisis, even if that's not in our financial best interest. So please, if you find value in this work, go to progressiveindiana.net and subscribe at the paid level. It's only $5 a month or $50 a year to help us build the infrastructure that will pop the right-wing media bubble in this state. And if a paid subscription isn't in the cards for you right now, that's okay. You can still help out by liking and sharing on social media, commenting, leaving reviews, providing feedback, and forwarding our content to your people. Get us when you can. Mostly, we just want you here in this community of Hoosiers dedicated to making the state and its government work for all of us, not just the elite few. Please join us. Follow me on Blue Sky, Instagram, and Threads at whosleft.us and on Facebook, TikTok, and YouTube at Who's Left. Progressive Indiana Network's handle is the full spelled out name on most sites, but on Blue Sky and TikTok, it is PIN Indiana. Please help us grow with a follow wherever you're at. Now, let's welcome this week's guests. One of our regulars, you know her, you love her. She's the Democratic candidate for State House District 81 up there in Fort Wayne. It's Sharon Wight. Sharon, welcome.
Good morning. When you said it wasn't a repeat, I was like, oh, is that a commentary on the fact that I'm back?
Listen, we love having you back. You're one of our favorites. Don't tell the others. For the folks who don't know you and love you already, though, briefly introduce yourself.
So my name is Sharon Wight. I'm running for Indiana House District 81 up here in Fort Wayne, Indiana, in Northwest Allen County.
All right. Very good. I understood you slayed a dragon last night.
I did. We had an amazing fundraiser with 6 of us candidates up here in Allen County, including our congressional candidate up here in District 3, Kelly Thompson, Wesley Heffenden, who's running for District 83, Blaine Sefton, who's running for State Senate 14, Timothy Murphy, who's running for State Senate 19, and one of our county commissioner candidates, Kate Connor. And we had an absolute blast together. There was laughter, there were tears. There was some really poignant moments, and anybody who got to watch that was so lucky. It was a really special time.
What fun. What fun. A neat idea. Hey, let's welcome a neat person to join us here this afternoon, or sorry, morning. It's still morning. What is time? Time is a flat circle. But a first timer to this space, another state house candidate, looking to represent District 73 down there from Shelbyville to Greensburg and down toward Columbus. Alan Miller, welcome.
Hey, how's it going?
Pleasure to meet you. Welcome to the Who's Left universe. Introduce the good folks to yourself.
Well, like you said, my name's Alan Miller. I'm the House candidate for District 73. It's, like you said, Greensburg, Shelbyville, and then a whole lot of farmland heading down towards Columbus. I didn't get to have any fun slaying dragons yesterday like Sharon did.
But, no, but you did get baked in the hot sun.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, we got a nice little burn line there.
That is an epic farmer's tan, man.
That's what 4 hours waving signs against these data centers will get you if you forget to wear sunscreen.
We will come to some data centers in the back end of the show, but for now, let us begin. And let's start with ICE. So, ever since the rogue immigration enforcement agency killed a couple of American citizens in cold blood this winter in Minneapolis, the department had been somewhat restrained under new leadership. We even, maybe possibly, saw glimpses of accountability. This week, federal authorities finally turned over long withheld evidence in the cases of ICE victims Renee Good and Alex Preddy to state prosecutors in Minnesota. But over the past month, agents have drastically increased the number of arrests, and last week shot and killed 35-year U.S. resident Lorenzo Salgado Araujo in Houston. This week, their rampage continued. Monday, an ICE officer fatally shot 26-year-old Joan Sebastian Duran Guerrero in the town of Biddeford, Maine. Duran Guerrero had just pulled out of his driveway to leave for work, which he was legally authorized to do, when agents attempted to stop him. The official story is that the vehicle tried to flee and an officer opened fire, quote, fearing for public safety. Within hours, hundreds of residents of the normally quiet coastal town flooded the downtown in protest. We later learned the identity of the trigger man, 37-year-old David Michael Brulette, an Army veteran with a work history as a VA cop and a corrections officer, and according to relatives, a history of violent and abusive behavior. The next day, another man, later identified as Juan Jairo Coronilla Duran, was struck and killed by a semi-truck while running across a busy road trying to escape ICE and DHS agents in St. Augustine, Florida. He entered the U.S. legally only 3 weeks ago. In the wake of these two incidents, Homeland Security announced they would pause most ICE traffic stops, only for a furious Trump to overturn that policy hours later. At least 10 people have now been killed in encounters with agents since the start of Trump's second term. Alan, let me begin with you. I'd like your thoughts. Oh, you're on mute, sir. There you go.
Sorry about that. I turned it off because I had a little cough that I had to get out, and I didn't want to cough over you. Now the big thing that stands out to me about this, obviously you got a guy with a history of domestic violence with a badge and a gun, and that's unfortunately a story that we see play out all too often. It's one of the professions that has the highest domestic violence rates, and I want to be careful what I say. Just when people say that we need higher accountability, I think that kind of starts at the background check level. And we see these ICE agents going out with little to no background checks. I know when they started their hiring push, there were a bunch of left-leaning activists that were putting through applications and getting interviews with just horrible answers to these screening questions and getting through. And it's like, how much of that is deliberate to create a more hostile police force for ICE? Excuse me. And the thing that really gets me with these, the last couple ones, these are legal permanent residents or legal temporary residents. If due process is a zero-sum game, either everyone has it or no one has it. And when we send out these armed agents to just indiscriminately grab people off the streets, and you got Brett Kavanaugh saying it's okay to racially profile for immigration. Well, I've got a couple of coworkers that are naturalized citizens, dark skin, thick accent. Like, they're going to just get scooped up. and where are we going to be with that?
Yeah, and this is the same Supreme Court, the same administration that likes to talk about being colorblind, but then, out of the other side of their mouth, they say it's okay to racially profile people. Sharon, I want to speak to Alan's point a little bit about the training. I think, obviously the screening is important, where we're bringing in folks who probably have no business being issued a badge and a gun, and then not giving them sufficient training. You used to have to go through months and months of training to be an ICE agent. Say what you will about ICE before Trump's second administration began, whether you thought it should even exist or not. At least they were, trying to do their due diligence and put folks through a robust training program. Now, 47 days of training. Why did they settle on 47? Because that's the number of President Trump's administration. They just pulled it out of their ass. And Sharon, I don't know, I could be wrong. To me, it looks like they want trigger-happy goons to populate this agency.
It's hard to interpret it any other way, right? When you have people that like 47, I can't think of another field where 47 days of training is considered an acceptable number of days of training, other than, I will say I tried to work at a coffee. Yeah, I was about to say I tried to work at a coffee shop when I was in college, and they gave me like 15 hours of training, which wasn't nearly enough to work at a coffee shop. But 47 days of training for what is considered a professional career is just absolutely unacceptable. I think one of the most, for lack of a better word, interesting things about this story out of Maine is the fact that that Brulette called his ex-wife and asked her to lie for him, which, given the history between that couple, just sounds really interesting. Like, this is your ex-wife. What makes you think that she would lie for you? And why did you call her and admit to this? It just shows a level of, what's the word I'm looking for?
Audacity.
Audacity is a good one, but just not thinking, just a level of not thinking about what it is that you are doing. And I'm sure I'll come up with the word in like an hour, and I'll just.
Well, it's also kind of ominous, isn't it, Sharon? It's like there's an implicit threat to it. It's like, hey, I just killed a guy. You should probably go out there and lie for me.
Yeah, that's true.
Put two and two together there.
I hadn't even thought about it that way, but yeah, I was just thinking, like, your first thought after being involved in a police, like, being involved in a police action shooting, like, your first thought is to get somebody to cover for you.
Mm-hmm.
It's not, oh wow, this is like a heavy situation that I just caused. I need to cover my own ass.
Yeah.
And
instead of taking accountability, which is a story we're seeing over and over again out of these situations with this administration.
Well, speaking of, Sharon, I guess we should be grateful that they admitted they were wrong, but the ICE came out and said, both in last week's Arojo shooting down in Houston and then this week up in Maine with Guerrero, that neither of these men were the subjects of the enforcement action. They got the wrong guy. They went out and killed innocent men because they had the wrong identity. And again, trigger happy, quick trigger fingers. What was I just started blasting, right? Sharon, I don't know. What do you think?
I am not a fan of guns in general. They've scared me pretty much my entire life. And so, like, I don't even feel like 47 days is enough to be properly trained in how to properly handle a gun. And you have these people who, well, there's just so much about this that is wrong and that is just not showing the level of care that is needed for something that is so incredibly important. If they're, and I'm talking about the training aspect of it.
And again, say what you will about ICE, whether they should exist, whether we should be doing such aggressive immigration enforcement and deporting folks in the way we do. But, go back 10, 12, 15 years under the Obama administration, they were deporting a lot of folks. Well, they managed to do it peacefully. I mean, again, the word's a stretch. I mean, you're disrupting people's families. That's not entirely peaceful, but they managed not to shoot people willy-nilly when they were doing enforcement actions. And listen, it's not just these traffic stops that have proven fatal. This week, Jesus Manuel Arenas Silvas, age 45, died while being transferred between detention facilities in Georgia. His sister and advocacy groups say he had been deprived of necessary medication. He is at least the 22nd person to die in ICE custody this year. That's on top of at least 33 such deaths reported in 2025. And it's not just the detainees at risk. On Thursday, an off-duty employee of GEO Group, a private prison company, shot and injured a woman protesting outside a detention facility in Aurora, Colorado. Brandon Booth, 42, was arrested on probable cause of attempted second-degree murder, first-degree assault, felony menacing, and unlawful carrying of a concealed weapon. And there's an Indiana angle to this detention facilities story. The town of Maryville up in Lake County has been accused of restricting federal immigration enforcement by Attorney General Todd Rokita for opposing a proposed ICE warehouse facility in their city. This week, the town council tabled the Rokita's request to rescind their opposition resolution demanding more information from the AG before acting. So, and I think this, Alan, because it's not as gruesome, it's not as out in the open as these shootings in broad daylight. The people dying in ICE facilities because of the horrible conditions, we're up over 55 deaths now in just the last year and a half. On that count, I bet there's more that they're not reporting. This is it's criminal. Let's call these facilities what they are. They're concentration camps.
For sure, and especially the cruelty is the point with a lot of these policies. I think, and we saw what they were doing down in Florida, with branding an alligator Alcatraz, and saying like, oh, we're gonna feed them all to the gators if they get out, and then come to find out that they're losing track of people. There's I think 600 people unaccounted for that went through that facility.
No.
And where are they? And that's not to say that the past administrations are innocent. The Biden and Obama administrations lost track of people too, but they made an effort to find them and they were transparent about it. It's not coming out like way down the road. Oh hey, all these people that we joked about feeding to the gators, we can't find them. I did want to kind of circle back a little bit about getting the wrong person with the two shootings. That's not even close to a new story. That's what happened with the Breonna Taylor shooting. They were at the wrong house. And then I'm a car guy, so I follow a lot of automotive journalism. And last week, the story came out on The Drive about one of their editors getting flagged for having a stolen plate on his car by these flock cameras. Well, it turns out it was a New Jersey either manufacturer or dealer plate, and it's got 5 full-size characters and then 2 small size, like half-size characters. And one of these plates had been reported stolen that matched the 5 full-size characters, but Flock can't distinguish the 2 half-size characters. And so it flagged his car as being the stolen one. Well, there's probably 35 or 40 other manufacturer or dealer plates out there that have the same 5 digits together, with the half digits being the separate ones. And it really kind of calls into question, like, what are the methods that these people are using to track the targets that they're actually looking for, and how how badly implemented are these tools that they're coming up with the wrong people all the time.
And the whole point is in the, it comes from the top. It comes from Stephen Miller, Trump's senior advisor. They have quotas. It's just to round up as many people as you can, arrest them. We'll figure it out later. And that leads you to make mistakes like this and just, close enough, right? We'll bring them in. We'll put these people in detention. They can languish there for months before any of this stuff gets figured out. And, without medication, potentially, if you need it, and that we see these tragic circumstances like this. Sharon, if when this administration mercifully comes to an end, there needs to be a full reckoning into the treatment that was done to these people, and the folks responsible, from agents all the way on up to folks in the administration, need to be held accountable. If not in American courts, internationally. These things are, I would say, against international law as well.
Oh, absolutely. And I do want to circle back to the Maryville story. There's some key words here that I want to kind of address. The fact that we're using the word warehouse when talking about putting people into a facility, absolutely unacceptable. And also in this story, they apparently there was discussion about how this was an economic development opportunity. That one of the council members basically said that Rokita doesn't need to be telling the Maryville how to do economic development. Those words should also not be falling alongside what it is that we're talking about. People should not be in warehouses, and developing detention facilities should not be economic development.
Well, and that's what we get into when we have private prisons. I think I think private prisons should be abolished, and I this isn't exactly public record information. I have firsthand experience at a private detention facility. When I was 17, I got pulled over doing an 85 and a 30, and spent a weekend in a private juvenile detention facility. 17-year-olds gonna be 17-year-olds, right? The treatment that I got there was pretty stereotypical of what we're seeing with what's coming out about these ICE facilities. The bad food, the inhumane treatment. While I was there, I had a medical incident. And I stood up and passed out. And when I got to court on Monday morning, the private detention facility spun that as me faking a medical incident so that I could try to escape. So I know firsthand how honest these people are, and what we're hearing about what's going on in these facilities, what the official account is from these private detention facilities. The truth is going to be so much different, just based on my own firsthand experience.
And that would have been what, 15 years ago?
2008. Yeah,
and you're a white kid, right?
Oh yeah, and
we see how they're treating.
Yeah. I'll admit that was a huge eye opener for me. Is okay, this is what they're willing to do to average looking white kid. What are they doing to the black and brown population that we're not hearing about? And it was a huge eye opener for me.
Yeah, the whole system populated and staffed by the worst, most bigoted, small, insecure men, and we really need to rein in this entire thing, tear it all down to the studs. If you
think private prisons should be abolished.
Rebuilding it. 100%. So, let's move on, but we'll keep talking about small, insecure men. So this week, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth announced service members over 30 will be tested annually for testosterone deficiency, with treatment offered to those who score low, part of what he's branding the high T Department of War. Testosterone injections can cause aggressive behavior and mood swings, ironic, given the policy is touted as improving discipline and readiness. Meanwhile, the undisciplined and unqualified Hegseth is overseeing a conflict in Iran that is once again on the brink of all-out war. Iran has resumed attacking vessels attempting to traverse the Strait of Hormuz, and the U.S. Navy resumed a blockade of Iranian ports in the Persian Gulf, reducing shipping traffic in the critical waterway to a standstill. Trump announced and almost immediately rescinded a plan to charge ships a toll for safe passage. U.S. bombers struck Iranian military sites. The Islamic Republic responded with drone and missile attacks on Bahrain, Qatar, Jordan, and other U.S. allies in the region. Iranian-backed Houthis in Yemen launched an attack on a Saudi airport, potentially expanding the war. And as we came to the end of the week, both sides escalated the attacks to include civilian infrastructure. The U.S. hit bridges, ports, and energy sites in Iran Friday with retaliatory strikes, including an attack on a water desalination plant in Kuwait. I understand a couple of American service members were killed in Jordan. And then overnight, last night, after I put today's show together, the U.S. struck again to get revenge for those attacks. Alan, thoughts on these tiny, insecure men and their high T Department of War?
Well, I've heard the saying, if you go far enough left, you get your guns back, but I didn't think there was a far enough right, you get your gender affirming care back. the whole thing about the testosterone is, it's crazy. Like you said, higher elevated testosterone aggression. There's certainly a link there. I know as I've aged and grown and, average hormone levels go, I'm a way nicer person than I was when I was 19 and full of testosterone. I'm testosterone is what had me going 85 and a 30 when I was 17.
Right? Yeah. And then, multiply that by guns and bombs and fighter jets, right?
Yeah, and multiply that by what Jesse Waters was saying on Fox the other day about women around these bases better be scared. Scared of what? Are you what are you telling on yourself there, Jesse? It's
absolutely the worst people are in charge of these things. Sharon, let's talk about the war of it all. We had this memorandum of understanding less than 2 weeks ago. I thought we were working toward a peace deal. Here we are, full game on, right? They're at it again. Full war. American service members are being killed. I suspect more than have been named publicly so far. We will only find that out later. And this thing has blown past any kind of deadline. If you want to just look at things in pure, raw, cynical economic terms, the Strait of Hormuz is closed again. The strategic oil reserve is down to near nothing. And I think Americans are largely carrying on as if, this is over there, and it's like a movie. And we're not yet seeing the full effects. This fall, it's going to be brutal.
Oh, absolutely. I think so. If we bring it back here to Indiana, right? We've had this gas tax holiday that's been going on for 4 months now, and even with that, we've seen gas prices go down. They have started to. I don't know if you've noticed, they've started to creep back up, and they're people don't understand, I think, what's coming and how badly it's going to impact us, especially like you said, as the fall creeps in, as harvest creeps in. And going back to Alan's point about testosterone, when you move far enough to the right, you get your gender affirming care back. I actually had another podcast come out this week with our friend, the recovering Republican, and I was talking about LGBT healthcare and the comments that had come through about, we don't have LGBT healthcare. Like it was just kind of gross. But that was the first thing that I thought when we started seeing this conversation about testosterone, and just the fact that, you do get gender affirming care if you have the right type of gender affirming care, I guess.
It's pathetic, the double standards. It is. It's the smallest, tiniest, most insecure men. They hate themselves, and they think if they go blow stuff up and kill people, that makes them big, important, tough guys. And we are seeing that it only brings harm. It puts themselves they put themselves in harm's way. They put innocent people, innocent Iranian schoolgirls in harm's way, and they put every American in economic harm's way. It is, Alan. I don't know. Keep this thing going.
Well, it's just what do they call it? Little man syndrome.
Napoleon syndrome.
Yeah. When you're so terribly insecure about your own self, you project all this onto other people, and I think that's really at the root of what's going on. We've got Pete Hegseth was wildly unqualified to be, Secretary of Defense, and now he's all trying to project that as like, I'm a big tough leader, and I know what I'm doing. And it's like, no, you're not. You're a drunkard that stumbled his way from Fox News into the Pentagon.
Because he looks the part. That's it, right? Trump
likes
the way he looks on TV.
He doesn't even can you imagine him in a uniform? I'm gonna pull it up and Google it.
I have a hard time taking the guy seriously, because he's plainly out of his depth, out of his element entirely. And this is how Trump hires people. He looks for people that are, look the part. They look good on TV. They are slick-tongued presenters, and they are loyal first and foremost. You mentioned, little man syndrome. Napoleon had his Waterloo. This Iran war is Trump's Waterloo, I think.
Yeah. Well, it's all of ours. It's not just his. We all get to feel that. And what Sharon was saying about the gas tax holiday that we've had, that ends first week of August and can't be renewed without a special session of the legislature, which we can't legally call because the legislature doesn't have any budget left for sessions.
Well,
so
we've got
Ron could try to. Right.
We do have a surplus.
Yeah, we'll talk about that toward the end of the show. Yeah, and what the things we spend our surplus on. But let's stay in the Middle East and talk about our ally over there, Israel, a little bit. So because successive Congresses have, over the last 80 years, offloaded more and more of their responsibility for national defense to the executive, their tools for stopping things like this illegal, unjustified, unsuccessful war have been drastically limited. Largely, all they can do is voice their displeasure and wield the power of the purse. Now, Tuesday, Senate Democrats did so, blocking the $1.15 trillion National Defense Authorization Act, saying there are no votes tying their no votes directly to the Iran war, with Minority Leader Chuck Schumer saying, hold on, got to do the Schumer here. The NDAA cannot become a permission slip for that recklessness. Trump does not get to drag the American people deeper into a war he cannot explain and does not know how to end, and then demand Congress look the other way. Now, buried inside the NDAA is a provision called the Israel Futures Act, a provision requiring the Pentagon to establish permanent joint U.S.-Israel defense research and technology integration, including AI, quantum computing, directed energy weapons, and missile defense systems that a bipartisan group of critics are likening to treason. Even one-time staunch Israel defenders are beginning to turn on the increasingly rogue U.S. ally, who this week announced plans for new illegal settlements in both Gaza and the West Bank. Wednesday, 100 House Democrats voted for an amendment to cut $3.3 billion in U.S. aid to Israel, including former Speaker Nancy Pelosi, Whip Catherine Clark, and even the hawkish Seth Moulton. Still, nearly as many Democrats voted along with nearly every Republican to defeat the amendment. Still, Sharon, big deal. The American people have already turned on our rogue genocidal ally. The establishment of the two major parties, a lot slower coming along.
Yeah, the fact that it wasn't significantly more people, particularly in that House vote, is incredibly disturbing. But it's at least it seems like there is a possibility that our Congress is listening to their constituents about this particular issue. We're seeing that in the Senate, where they are basically saying, no, we're not going to keep funding this. Again, not enough people voted no on that, but enough voted no that it did not move forward. And then in the House, again, not enough people voted no on it. And I mean, I think that some of them are starting to realize that people are actually paying more attention than perhaps they used to. And so they are starting to vote in kind. It's a little bit frustrating that they let it get this far to begin with. One of the Israel Futures Act is something that is incredibly disturbing to me. I don't think that we should be merging our military with anybody or have joint or permanent joint integration. Now I know that we have agreements with UK, Australia, and I believe a couple of others that are similar.
Yeah.
But there's more. I would feel like there's more checks and balances again, because those agreements are with multiple nations in, I think, pretty much every case. It's not just a one-to-one. And so that is something that feels a little bit less, which of course this act is coming at the same time that our individual in chief has been screaming for years for us to leave NATO.
Right.
Ironic. And then Alan, there's a huge like Indiana component of that kind of Israel and the U.S. joint, being tied together at the hip thing. Recently Mike Braun introduced this like Iron Nation initiative to encourage like Israeli defense contractors to set up shop here in Indiana. We've got the Purdue Research Foundation and I forget the name of the joint effort between IU and Purdue and the Applied Research Agency or initiative or something, ARI or IR. Anyway, that's down here at Crane. So between Crane and Purdue Research Foundation and this Iron Nation initiative, I think Indiana was kind of ground zero for where that Israel-U.S. integration would be applied at the ground level.
Yeah, and that's particularly troubling to me, just because Mike Braun is just like, oh, here's $120 million to give away to private industries to come into Indiana, and nobody gets to have any say in it. We're just doing it, and that on face value is disturbing, just because we shouldn't be spending our tax dollars at the whim of the governor. That kind of flies in the face of the constitutional requirement. The legislature sets the budget and expenditures, and for all their faults, in the last budget cycle, they didn't allocate $120 million to economic development with Israel. And the other thing too is a little hypocritical. He talks a big game about America first and Indiana first. Well, Israel, top of the list. Here you go. We're doing Israel first now. meanwhile, the Israel is committing genocide in Gaza. There's no wiggle room for opinion on that. It's measurably genocidal what they're doing to the Palestinians in Gaza.
Yeah, the people who define and track these things say as much. And if anybody can't just go on and agree with what the UN and human rights agencies are saying, what are you doing? The American people have shifted on this. I do not think it is the albatross that it used to be, for sure. And
I think that's reflected in the. I think that what you said about it's not the albatross that it used to be. I think that's reflected in the fact that we've got 104 Republican or representatives, not Republicans. Most of them were Democrats. But you got 104 representatives willing to vote to end military aid to Israel. I will say I do see a disturbing amount of anti-Semitic sentiment behind a lot of the Facebook posts that I see. Is like yes, we should be wary of Israel because they're a genocidal government. We shouldn't be wary of Israel because they're Jews. I just want to get that out clear in the open. I see a lot of people Flock is this Jewish cabal of no. Flock has ties to the Israeli government, but it also has ties to the United States government.
I mean, it would be like saying it'd be like saying every American is a Christian nationalist for us to. That's gonna be fun if that gets clipped. But for us to blame the Jewish faith, blame the Jewish population would be this equivalent. And so we really need to, as a society, stop pushing these stereotypes and call the governments what they are. But don't put that on the people.
Yeah, it's a tricky line to walk, and unfortunately, the Netanyahu government has done their best to tie themselves. To foster this connection between the entire Jewish population of the world and the Israeli government, so they can weaponize those anti-Semitism accusations, and it unfortunately plays right into their hands. So we have to be very careful the way we talk about these things. Along these lines, I want to zoom out a little bit, and we know, as we were just talking about, that both Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and the former Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, they are both wanted by the International Criminal Court for war crimes, right? Well, this week, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio announced a whole-of-government campaign to dismantle the ICC, urging allied nations to withdraw from it and cut financial support, with State Department officials threatening travel bans, visa revocations, and sanctions against countries that don't comply. In an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal, Rubio characterized the tribunal as run by, quote, a powerful network of leftist non-government organizations, smug globalists, and hostile third world governments. This escalates a campaign that began during Trump's first term over Afghanistan war crimes investigations. The current administration has already imposed sanctions on ICC officials investigating both the U.S. and Israel. Two human rights groups this week sued the administration over those sanctions, arguing their advocacy work has been stifled as a result. A 2025 executive order threatens, quote, tangible and significant consequences for anyone connected to the court's transgressions, and the U.S. has since sanctioned Palestinian rights groups, ICC judges and staff, and UN Special Rapporteur Francesca Albanese. These attacks on international bodies as a global conspiracy and threat to U.S. sovereignty are not a new invention of the Trump era, but echo far-right John Birch Society's Get the U.S. Out of the UN campaign from the 1950s. Alan, all that was old is new again.
Yeah, the wild part is that the International Criminal Court was kind of built on the backs of Nuremberg. It's not a new concept to have an international tribunal panel to prosecute war crimes around the world, and for for a certain amount, I do kind of understand the U.S. government not wanting to recognize the authority of the International Criminal Court, just because we kind of did some war
Because
crimes
we
in
do war
Afghanistan.
crimes and we want
You
to be able
know,
to get away with doing war crimes.
yeah, and that's not even getting into the callous the callous nature of civilian casualties, and trying to label it as like the cost of war. You look at the school that got bombed in Iran at the start of this war of choice that Trump is waging against Iran. That was based on old intelligence, and people were warned that it was old intelligence and probably not valid as a military target anymore, and that warning was ignored. And now there's 100 families that are missing their kids, and that really stood out to me. It's like, my daughter's 11. That's kind of the like age group there. And if we're in the middle of a war and a bomb gets dropped on my kid's school, how radicalizing is that going to be for me? And now we've got 160 people that already 160 families that already don't like the US government. Now how much more do they hate us because we killed their daughters? Hold on just a second.
We talked about the Trump administration and his ICE officials needing to face consequences after the end of his administration. And on an international level, the United States needs to start facing consequences for our actions when we commit war crimes overseas. George W. Bush should be in The Hague. He should not be the kindly old grandfather sharing candy with Michelle Obama at all these events. I want to stay on this thread a little bit, but sort of change the angle slightly here. So, little Marco isn't opposed to all international cooperation, right? Thursday, he convened officials from over 60 countries to address what he calls a rising threat from left-wing political terrorism. At the conference, Trump's little Timu Goebbels, Stephen Miller, framed the perceived threat in war-footing terms, saying, quote, "If your civilization is your home, you must defend it with the same passion and force as if an enemy intruder is inside your own house." Now, the numbers do not support their framing. A report by the Center for Strategic and International Studies found that over the last 30 years, right-wing political violence far outpaced left-wing incidents by orders of magnitude. 2025 was the first time left-wing terrorism incidents surpassed right-wing incidents. Now, not because left-wing violence increased, but because right-wing terrorism numbers decreased dramatically. Sharon, it is my contention that these right-wing terrorism numbers decreased because the right-wing terrorists are the state now.
I think that that's a valid assessment. I also think that it is interesting that these gentlemen who are running our country seem to think that we still have the power to tell our allies what to do in regard to what they should and should not be doing, what they should and should not be a part of. The fact that we think that we even have the power to dismantle the International Criminal Court. I kind of my headcanon about this this convening of officials was everyone just kind of patting America on the head and going, okay, yeah, we hear you. We're listening to you. I mean, we are seeing, buddy. Yeah, we are seeing, we are seeing incidents of other countries who are moving more to the right? We are seeing that. We're seeing that in different governments, but it's not at the level that we're seeing here. And it's also not at the level where like we have kind of historically more right-wing governments that are very much criticizing what is happening in the United States. So we are not leading the world in this. They are getting more and more dismayed, for lack of a better word, by what it is that's happening here in the United States and the atrocities that are happening. So it's not like they think that what we're doing is good. And again, and going to what you said about the data not supporting the framing, I mean, I think that it's absolutely a valid assessment that, you know, we're not going to be assessing things as terrorism when they are, quote unquote, the unfortunate law of the land.
The right-wing terrorists are ICE, right? That's just, unfortunate law enforcement mistakes now at this point. They don't call it the terrorism that it is. Let's talk about another international incident, okay? So, this week, wildfires in Canada sent massive plumes of smoke across the Midwest, Mid-Atlantic, and northeastern United States, affecting some 109 million Americans. Baltimore, Washington, Philadelphia, Cleveland, and Detroit were plagued with some of the world's worst air quality. Here in Indiana, Indianapolis issued no zone action days, while Fort Wayne recorded its worst air quality on record since the National Air Pollution Monitoring Program began in 1980. But there is harm beyond the haze. A 2025 Carnegie Mellon study estimated wildfire smoke caused $200 billion in health damages and 20,000 premature deaths in 2017 alone. I imagine it's only gotten worse since then. The response from Indiana U.S. Senator Jim Banks, though, blame Canada. Banks called for sanctions on our northern neighbor, demanding reparations for Americans' healthcare costs. Trump echoed the sentiment on Truth Social, accusing Canada of willful negligence in forest management. Ohio Senator Bernie Moreno announced plans to introduce a bill which would sanction Canadian officials, freeze their assets, revoke visas, and impose tariffs. Of course, these idiots fail to acknowledge the real problem: man-made climate change. Science shows Canada is warming twice as fast as the global average, extending fire seasons and intensifying blazes in its boreal forests. Meanwhile, the Trump administration actively pursues policies that intensify climate change. Sharon, you are in Fort Wayne. Can you speak to the real-life effects of this disaster?
So I'm personally very, very allergic to. I've always said cigarette smoke, but it's smoke in general, and it definitely impacts my ability to breathe. Friday didn't go outside except for to let my dog out to go to the bathroom. But I was noticing brain fog. I have inflammatory health conditions. My hands hurt. The only thing that I can describe, like, I felt sick to my stomach and also like I couldn't breathe all at the same time. And I was indoors in the air conditioning. And that's how I was feeling. And what was even kind of crazier was, at first I was like, okay, is this just, is this a psychosomatic effect, a placebo effect? But that evening when the air quality started to improve, I felt a noticeable difference in obviously my ability to breathe, but also my inflammatory conditions. Like all of a sudden it was like, oh, my hands are doing what I want them to do. I'm not feeling the sickness in my stomach anymore. And so there's definitely and I've been reading some articles about this also. Canada is mostly unpopulated. Like I read an article that it's
nobody here but us moose.
And I don't even want to think about the animals that are being impacted by this. I'll end up off screen. But there's about 3.5 people per, I think it was square mile in an article that I read in large portions of Canada. And that means that it's not like there are people there who can stop the fires when they're small. And a boreal forest, for those of you who don't know, I nerd out about a lot of things, folks. But boreal forests are forests that are essentially primed to burn. They are a type of forest that is actually supposed to, that they're meant to be burned in order to keep soil changing, that type of thing. But the thing is, not at this level. There's not supposed to be this many acres or hectares of forest burned all at once. And that is why we're seeing the problem here. We have a tinderbox that has increased in temperature over the last several decades, and it is dry. I was reading about dry thunderstorms, which was a new concept to me. These are thunderstorms that are happening with thunder and lightning without precipitation. So what happens when we have lightning and there's not water to help mitigate it? This is what we see happening. And so it's an absolute perfect series of events that's happening or making this happen. And apparently, because Canada didn't invest in massive fans to stop things at the border, Canada is at fault for not managing this. Canada's at fault because they aren't sending, every member of their population out to fight the fires. Apparently,
they're not raking the forests. Alan, you
need to work on your Jim Banks and your Stephen Miller there.
What does Jim Banks even sound like? I've never.
He's a generic white guy. But Alan, like the U.S. is historically the world's largest contributor to climate change. If anybody deserves blame, it is us. And it is ironic that it is Washington, where the policy decisions that have been made, New York, where the financial decisions have been made, and the Rust Belt, largely where we put all these fossil fuels and all this particulate matter into the air that caused climate change, that are bearing the effects of it right now. It is ironic.
I think it it might be a little unfair to say that the U.S. has been the largest contributor to climate change. Just from a sheer numbers game, China puts out a lot more pollution than we do, at least over the last couple decades. Head start. Right, we had a huge head start, but it's these corporations more than it is the U.S. Shell and Exxon and BP, they all knew back in the 70s that burning fossil fuels was going to cause climate impact, and then they paid to hide those studies, and everybody made fun of Al Gore for saying that we're going to see more tornadoes, more hurricanes, more wildfires in the next 20 years. Well, here we are 20 years later. What do we have? 6 months into the year, we've got a record year for tornadoes. June was a record month for tornadoes.
Many years
in Indiana.
Like a day.
Yeah. Illinois is pushing 200 tornadoes in a single month. And everybody's commenting like, oh man, it looks like Tornado Alley is shifting. Yeah, just like the models predicted back in the late 90s and early 2000s. And everybody laughed them out of the room. And here we are reaping the consequences of that. And these Canadian wildfires, well, last year it was the Colorado wildfires that were causing smoke here in southeastern Indiana. It's just, northern Indiana is feeling it worse this time because the fires are starting further north. And, I think, spending all day outside yesterday is why I'm pretty stopped up today. Just, I haven't looked at what the air quality was for Greensburg and Shelbyville. But
not nearly as bad down here as it was up north, but
sure.
you still get some of it. These things don't respect international borders. They laugh
I remember
at our
last
imaginary
year
lines. So I guess I've got to turn the page on this one, and we've got to talk. Speaking of denying the truth, right? We talked about climate change. Well, President Trump Thursday night gave this farce of a speech in prime time, once again making sweeping, conspiratorial, unsubstantiated claims that U.S. elections have been rigged and stolen, citing a series of newly declassified documents. Well, the problem is the documents don't say what he implies they do, and we can get into that a little bit here in a second, but ABC, NBC, and CNN declined to carry the speech live to threats of license revocations by Trump's FCC. It doesn't work like that. Even friendly outlets like Fox and CBS added context and distanced themselves from the remarks. Now, ostensibly, the purpose of the speech was to pressure Republican lawmakers to pass the so-called Save America Act, SAVE, Suppression and Voter Elimination. But in reality, the purpose of this farce was to lay the groundwork to contest or outright interfere with the administration of this November's midterm election. DHS Secretary Mark Wayne Mullin delivered his own remarks the next day, threatening state and local election administrators with lost funding investigation, fines, or prison time if they don't comply with the administration's demands. Alan, did you watch this thing Thursday night? Did you give up that half hour of your life?
It's it's a half hour I'm never going to get back. And he used a lot of words, but didn't really say much besides elections are stolen. We need this pass the Save America Act. Sorry, I have a terrible Trump.
Oh, there you go, Sharon. You got your sandwich between dueling Trumps.
Oh my gosh, it's in stereo now.
But it's I think it did set the stage for trying to interfere with the midterm elections. And I think a big part of that is they see the polls, they know that they're running on unpopular positions, and a lot of these representatives have kind of shackled themselves to Trump, and now that he's going down with them, they can't undo the shackles. And the ones that opposed him, Thomas Massey got primaried out, and Thomas Massey, I would say, is kind of the one House Republican I disagree with on probably 95% of his policy positions, but he's actually grown a spine in the last couple of years.
Yeah, at least he has a moral core. To your point, he voted with Trump 90% of the time.
And it's beautiful.
Yeah, like,
Sharon, let's talk about a little bit of the details of this, right? So, first of all, this speech was obviously written by Stephen Miller, and Trump really struggled to get through it. The man has definitely lost his fastball. He's squinting; he can barely read anymore. He's rasping his way through it, and mostly he failed to connect all these cherry-picked dots, right? He said China had stolen voter data on 200 million Americans without mentioning that much of that data is publicly available and that they didn't do anything with it.
Well,
he also
and on top of
oh, no, go ahead, Alan.
Sorry, I was saying, on top of that, he's saying all this happened in the lead up to the 2020 election. That was under his watch that all this happened. And he's trying to say that
it was the deep state. They kept the information from me.
Oh my God.
To that effect, he said in his speech the other night that they kept raw intelligence from his presidential daily briefing. Raw intelligence doesn't go in the presidential daily briefing. It
Summaries
is by
and
nature
analysis
unconfirmed. It is rumor,
Yeah.
He also accused China of trying to bribe the press to give to cover him in an unflattering light, when really unbiased coverage of Trump's own behavior portrays him in an unflattering light. He accused Venezuela of manipulating its own elections, but conveniently omitted the part that found that Maduro regime had no ability to affect elections outside its own country. And he rehashed this 6-year-old story about a Michigan group creating fake voter registrations, but pointed to no evidence that fraudulent votes had been cast. Sharon,
meanwhile,
what? Yeah.
Oh, so meanwhile, there's several dozen individual cases of Trump supporters, voting on their dead spouse's absentee ballot or their parent in a nursing home's absentee ballot.
Well, and on top of that, the documents very clearly show that Russia interfered in the election in his favor. I've seen some stuff from Hunter Biden just breaking it down. It's absolutely fascinating. I think one of the most fascinating aspects of it is the fact that this data had to come from Trump supporting states, because those are the ones that have turned over their data. So let's say that what they're saying is true. They're not saying it's not true, but let's say it was. That's a call coming from inside the House, which means that that means it's your red states that were the ones that were supposedly cooking the books. And because they don't have the blue state data, they only have the data from the red states that have turned it over.
We've seen it here in Indiana. Diego Morales our Secretary of State, was the first in line to hand over all of our sensitive voter information. You're on mute, Alan. But and then
telling my son
he
I'm
found,
not available.
Oh, sorry. After Morales turned over this data, they ran the numbers and found that, there were a handful of like non-citizens registered to vote somehow. And even like, I think they found one person that cast a vote illegally, it's statistically insignificant.
That was another one of the numbers that he was throwing around on Thursday evening, 378,000. Okay, that's not a small number of people, but that is the size of Fort Wayne. That is the number of people the size of Fort Wayne in a country that's 330 million people, and those were just people that were registered to vote, not necessarily any evidence that those people actually did so. And so
like 150 million votes were cast in the last presidential election.
Right. Like this is not something that was going to make the difference for whether he won or lost in the 2020 election. There were millions of people beyond that voted in the election where he lost. So there was a whole bunch of stuff here, but I also want to, it was, and I posted this in places where both of you could see it. It was really interesting to me how on task he was on Thursday. And I think some of that, going back to what you said, Scott, where he wasn't connecting the dots. I think that was because he was staying on script, and some of that creative thinking that he used to be potentially effective at doing, he just doesn't seem like he was on task, but at the same time, he wasn't himself at the same time. And that was a really interesting dichotomy to see.
What he did, he took these like unrelated, potentially disruptive scenarios. They're all hypotheticals, and I guess if somebody were to actually pull off this hypothetical plot and all five of them lined up, then potentially something could be done. It's all horse crap, and it's the point, Alan, is specifically to sow doubt now, because they are going to lose the elections badly in November, and he might also be preparing to, with these accusations of international interference, declare some state of emergency so we don't get to vote, or they nationalize the voting procedure. God knows they could be putting ice in the polling stations. Steve Bannon says that's what they're going to do.
Yeah, which is, a pretty clear constitutional violation of the separation of state and federal powers. And I do think this is kind of the culmination of a lot of, federalization of powers that has just gone unchecked for the last several decades. Everybody cried foul when Obama tried to push the Affordable Care Act, because it was, the federalization of everything. And, it's kind of
rules
sad
for
to see.
Not for me, right?
Yeah, it's sad to see so many people that were violently opposed to much more beneficial consolidation of power when a Democrat president was doing it, and now they're like, oh, this is fine just because a Republican president is doing it. I do think we
care of people. Yeah, that's a hostile federal takeover.
Yeah,
something like this. Oh well, that's necessary for national security, right?
Yeah, and there's a reason why the framers put administration of the elections on the states and not on the federal government. And it was specifically because we saw in the lead up to the Revolutionary War, we saw the crown putting its thumb on the scales of some of the parliamentary elections. And I think something that doesn't quite get talked about a lot as a result of the American Revolution, there were a lot of political reforms in the UK government that weakened the crown's power because they didn't want to see that on the home front. You know, they saw, oh wow, the colonies are this mad. Like we maybe need to look in the mirror a little bit so that we don't have this happening, you know, so that Liverpool doesn't get any bright ideas and rally against London kind of thing.
And the British Empire reformed itself, and it didn't do any crimes against humanity ever again. Oh, wait.
I didn't say that. Don't put words in my mouth.
So, you know, let's stay on this a little bit, but shift gears slightly. Now, we know that Trump's undermining confidence in elections and laying the groundwork here for shenanigans this November, and that's concerning in its own right. But it's the all-of-government approach his administration is taking that should worry us all. You know, we mentioned Mullin threatening state officials, and earlier we talked about Marco Rubio and Stephen Miller invoking the largely non-existent threat of left-wing political violence. Previously, former Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard participated in an FBI raid in Fulton County, Georgia, where 2020 election materials were seized, setting up that claim of foreign interference. And Gabbard's replacement this week testified before the U.S. Senate, doing the same dance several Trump nominees have recently done. Jay Clayton, the U.S. Attorney for Manhattan, tapped to be the new Director of National Intelligence, repeatedly declined during his confirmation hearing to directly say Joe Biden won the 2020 election, only saying that the results were certified. He also declined to say whether Gabbard's role in that raid was appropriate, initially claiming he wasn't even aware of it. Clayton also refused to discuss his office's recent subpoenas of 4 New York Times journalists over reporting on the security, or lack thereof, on the new Air Force One. Sharon, you know, we should be concerned that this guy is just another rubber stamp for the Trump administration. He's going to go along with everything they want to do, and he's going to weaponize this you know, threat of quote unquote foreign interference to interfere in this election in November.
Well, and to that point, I actually saw an article this morning that apparently Tulsi Gabbard's brother was arrested in Hawaii for crimes against children. So like that just to me, that just adds to this story, right? Because Tulsi Gabbard was selected for this role. Now Jay Clayton has been selected for this role. And it's just clear that there's not proper vetting being done. It's, are you going to fight like hell for this administration? Yes, that's what I'm going to do. Okay, fine. You're signed up. The story about journalism and Air Force One reporting is possibly one of the most ridiculous aspects of this, because like it just goes to ego again with this administration, right? Like it just goes to the journalists were telling a story like that had, there might have been embellishments, but there were true facts. Air Force, or the new Air Force One, the Qatari Air Force One, was found not to be as secure as the older versions. And so Trump decided to not take that one to England and then lie about it. And then journalists uncovered the story and basically told the truth about it. And now we have a situation where First Amendment rights are under attack again for some reason, and it all just seems to go back to ego.
Yeah, well, you know, the free press is necessary for a functioning democracy, is it not?
I will say, you know, I have a journalism degree, so this is not just like a spitball opinion. You know, this is an informed opinion. I will say there is room for, you know, national security interests to quash reporting. You know, it was widely underreported during World War II just how bad FDR's health was. You know, just because if that got out, that would have been a huge propaganda win for Nazi Germany. You know, particularly with their genocidal eugenics. What's the adjective?
Eugenicist.
Eugenicidal. Ooh, eugenicist opinions about people with disabilities. That would have been, I think, a pretty significant propaganda win for Nazi Germany, and that was one of the top of the list examples in my journalism classes about like when not to run a story. So there is room for a national security interest to not say, while the president is traveling in this plane, hey, this plane doesn't have the full countermeasure suite that the regular Air Force One has. But there are other points too. The other angles to take. You can say like, hey, this is just a monument to his corruption that he's traveling abroad in. And there's already risks to him traveling in that plane. Biggest risk. There's 2 Air Force Ones that have the light blue paint scheme. There's only one that has the dark blue paint scheme. So that right there, which one that is. You don't know if that's the one he's on or not. If there's videos of him getting on the dark blue one and you see the dark blue one fly over, you're 100% certain that that's the one he's on. But if you see him get into the light blue one and then you see a light blue one over, well, 50-50.
Yeah, the old deception. Yeah. I need to move things on because, in addition to Clayton's confirmation hearing this week, there was another one as well. And that is for acting Attorney General Todd Blanche. He is seeking a promotion from acting to the full-time gig. And during his testimony, Blanche faced skepticism from members of both parties over this $1.776 anti-weaponization slush fund for Trump to dole out to aggrieved insurrectionists. Now, Blanche declared it dead, but a federal judge Monday blasted the underlying settlement, and Texas Senator John Cornyn established that Trump technically hasn't agreed in writing to kill it. Blanche underscored Democratic concerns about his independence. Asked if he and Trump are friends, he said, quote, I'm his lawyer. Was his lawyer. He also committed to Alabama Senator Katie Britt to prioritize the restriction of mail-order abortion pills. And hanging over all of Blanche's testimony was the specter of one Jeffrey Epstein. Survivors of the late child sex trafficker publicly urged the Senate to reject Blanche's confirmation, citing his poor handling of the Epstein case to this point. More on Epstein and his victims momentarily, but Alan, this guy, is he more or less qualified for this job than Pam Bondi, who was terribly unqualified for this job?
You're muted.
Oh, sorry, I was on mute. I was saying that's kind of a tough call to say who is the least qualified for this. I will say, on her way out the door, Pam Bondi tried to blame a lot of the improper redactions on him. And they both are in clear violation of the Epstein Files Transparency Act, or whatever the official name is.
Yeah, of which we've still only got half the files, even though Blanche says that we've got everything we're going to get.
Yeah, and it's really telling that a lot of these people that are, trying to pawn it off as, oh, I wasn't aware of that, are named in the files. It's, and then he's his little slip up about I am his lawyer. I don't buy for a second that he doesn't view the Attorney General position as an extension of the Oval Office. And
that is exactly how Trump has treated his Attorney General throughout his administration. Yes.
Yeah, the pattern of behavior is very much there. His personal prosecutor specifically. To
go after his enemies. Yes.
Yeah. And that alone is disqualifying. Whether or not that's more disqualifying than Pam Bondi, flip a coin. I don't know.
Let's talk about the Epstein of it all there, Sharon. So, one of the demands by senators of Blanche was that he meet personally with a group of Epstein survivors, some of whom testified before the committee this week. This idea was introduced earlier in the week by Illinois Senator Dick Durbin and seconded by North Carolina Republican Tom Tillis, whose vote Blanche cannot afford to lose. Thursday afternoon, Blanche did just that, meeting with the survivors. The one of them, Danny Bensky, called the meeting insufficient, saying, quote, he danced around his wording, repeatedly interrupted us, and could not commit to anything that would demonstrate good faith or begin to restore trust. She said he offered no credible plan for accountability beyond Epstein and Maxwell themselves. Now, zooming out to their associates, former Obama White House counsel Catherine Rummler testified about her relationship with Epstein in a closed-door House oversight hearing Wednesday, after which Democrat Robert Garcia said, quote, it is difficult to see how she's being completely truthful in there. Co-founder and former CEO of the private equity giant Apollo Global Management, Leon Black, a close Epstein associate, credibly accused of abusing young women, was due to testify Thursday, but rescheduled for September 3rd, and Alan Dershowitz, who helped craft Epstein's 2008 plea deal, backed out of his Monday interview. The panel left scrambling to reschedule there. Sharon, your thoughts on the Epstein of it all?
Why are they allowed to reschedule anything when they are being, like... They just keep getting to push to kick the can down the road with all of these things. We're still letting these powerful men who have been very clearly named or were very clearly involved, and instead of using the law to the fullest extent, we just keep allowing it to get kicked down the road. I was actually, as we were just talking about Blanche, I was thinking about how William Barr handled things, and he didn't handle things he wasn't great at handling things either, but he, I believe, always kept at least a little bit of distance between the White House and the Attorney General's office until it got to the point. Well, yeah, I mean, I was about to say until it got to the point where he couldn't, and then he left. And I think that's one of the greatest issues I see, is that even the people who could fight these things choose to leave instead. I mean, we saw that with Marjorie Taylor Greene too, right? Like, she had become a very ardent supporter of the Epstein survivors and trying to get them to a point where they were actually being listened to. And then right as that was really starting to make headway, she leaves. And it just shows a certain level of cowardice in that these people seem to have in dealing with these very powerful men that, at least for me, as someone who's never dealt with people who are like that, it is incredibly confusing.
You mentioned Black. I was really looking forward to his testimony to hear what he would have to say Thursday, because this is under subpoena now. He started to testify back in June and basically ran out of the thing because that was voluntary testimony, and he just shut the thing down. So they subpoenaed him to actually get him under oath to tell the full story. Black, a very powerful individual, so powerful that he owns former U.S. senators, but we won't go down that road. And then Dershowitz, of course, very powerful Trump ally, very famous attorney. I'm old enough to remember, like, when he was one of O.J. Simpson's attorneys back in the 90s. Right. But very much all these folks and their impunity highlights that there is an Epstein class, these rich, powerful men who can get away with just about anything. Alan.
Oh, you say just about anything. I mean, it's anything and everything. There's all sorts of just heinous things detailed in those files. And there's been no accountability. And
these are the people who are fomenting a war that no one understands because they can.
And the folks who have seen accountability for it, typically over in Europe, you know, we have the former Prince Andrew. We've seen folks in Norway and France also face some prosecution for this. But it's not because of their crimes against young women. It's because of the financial crimes. So you can get away with anything until you,
until you mess with the money,
other rich people's money.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I do think that kind of points to like, I hate to use the term class warfare, but it does kind of point to these, these rich, powerful types that get away with all this stuff at the expense of the hardworking people that are either directly the victims of it or are suffering the consequences of these people trying to protect themselves and their friends, and it is very much a two-tiered justice system where you've got the rich and powerful get their own system. If you or I were called in front of Congress and said, "Oh, can we just put this off for 2 months?" No.
Right.
Like,
yeah, it's a big club and we ain't in it, right?
We're not in it. Yep.
A lot of the members of this Epstein class, this club, big fans of AI. Let's talk about AI. This is something we cover here a lot on this show, and specifically the data center angle. But let's start out wide and then zoom into a couple local stories. So Anthropic, the firm behind the Claude AI model, discussed their strategy for regulating the industry. Now, while other firms, namely OpenAI, the one behind ChatGPT, push for a uniform and generally lax nationwide approach, Anthropic is endorsing progressively stronger AI safety laws in each new state. Their Massachusetts-backed proposal is notably aggressive. It would require leading AI companies to hire independent evaluators assessing catastrophic risks like bioweapon development assistance, with enforcement power given to the state attorney general. Both companies are spending heavily in state political campaigns through dueling super PACs. Now, locally, it's the AI infrastructure drawing scrutiny. Monday, the Indianapolis City County Council's Metropolitan and Economic Development Committee voted to advance a moratorium on new data centers in the city. Mayor Joe Hogsett publicly endorsed the pause after months of avoiding comment on the issue. However, the moratorium would not pause projects already in the pipeline, and Wednesday, the Metropolitan Development Commission approved the DC Blox data center in Irvington on a 6-1 vote over objections from residents. Additional projects in Martindale, Brightwood, and Decatur Township continue to press forward. Sharon, I want to start with that Anthropic story. Is there such thing as an ethical AI company? Is there a way to go about doing this in a fair, equitable, responsible way?
I mean, I am of the opinion that there is always an ethical way to do things. And if there is an AI company that is suggesting that, that's the AI company that I would want to listen to. I mean, and Anthropic, whether AI is, I mean, the thing is, when we really break down AI, we have been using it for a decade or more, right? Whether it's in and the thing is, AI looks different. It's in Google giving us our responses. It is the pictures that people were. By the way, these pictures are unethical because they're stealing artists' work. But it's the pictures that people were creating using AI. There's just this. We're taking a topic that is very widespread and we're trying to granulate it down to ethics versus non-ethics. So that's a whole different conversation. But an AI company that is suggesting what a lot of us budding legislators, at least here in Indiana, are saying is that, or that we need to be doing this in a careful way. We need to be putting moratoriums until we understand it better. It at least is echoing the response of the average constituent who is now paying attention to this, I think.
I found it notable, Alan, that, in this article about Anthropic and their, safety concerns, it was more about like the existential risk of AI, like becoming self-aware or whatever, and defense
how many movies do we have about that?
But it's not really about the infrastructure and the environmental costs and the utility costs and the water usage and things like that are not really addressing those things.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of just endemic of cutting edge industry throughout history. Like when the train networks were expanding, nobody stopped to ask like what's all this coal exhaust doing to the environment. When we're looking at the Industrial Revolution and early power plants putting out massive amounts of pollutants, the environmental concerns were always secondary, and it's just a continuation of that pattern that environmental concerns take a back burner to progress, and it's troubling that we haven't learned from that pattern.
I can even remember that when we would have been kids and internet was rising, and the conversations about broadband and how, the creation of broadband and digging up of wires and putting up of more wires and all of that was going to impact the environment. Just clearly not slowing it down. And so now we have the logical extension of that and as I have said more than once on this show, clearly we did not listen to the movies that came out in the 1980s and the 1990s and prior and after.
Or the people that did got entirely the wrong message from them. Like these tech bros love sci-fi, but they didn't get that it was an allegory. It was a warning. It was, don't do this thing. And they're like, that thing that we're not supposed to do, that is friggin' awesome. I want to do it.
Why are we getting the Terminator sci-fi future and not the Star Trek one? Like, I want my replicators and warp drive, not having to worry about Skynet.
Right?
I'm a well-known sci-fi nerd on this show, and one of my favorites is Battlestar Galactica. And the like catchphrase of Battlestar Galactica is all of this has happened before and it will happen again. And in Battlestar Galactica, we see a race of humans who then ends up, I'm not going to give away too much, but they end up on another planet. And then the last episode fast forwards thousands of years. And we see that the new planet is doing the things that had happened in Galactica. And so
time is a flat wheel.
Exactly. And so all of this has happened before and it will happen again. We're just now seeing this live in our lifetimes.
Like clockwork, every 4 generations or so, we forget the lessons of the past as the people who actively remember them pass on. Great series on this. But let's move on, and we're going to stay local for the rest of the show here. We got a little less than a half hour left, and so last week, did I move on? Yes, I did. Sorry. Had to move my graphic over. Last week, Governor Mike Braun announced Chuck Goodrich, the CEO of Gaylor Electric, as the state commerce secretary. One of the things Gaylor specifically builds is large-scale data centers. Now, we learned this week that Goodrich, the multimillionaire executive head of one of the nation's largest non-union electrical contractors, who gave $25,000 to Braun's campaign in 2024, He was the largest individual donor to American Leadership PAC, contributing $300,000 in the month before May's primary to help fund the far-right candidates primarying Republican state senators who crossed President Trump in last year's redistricting fight. Braun's own PAC gave more than $750,000 to the effort. So here we have a Braun donor and political ally named to an important position just weeks after pouring massive sums into a shared political project. And we also learned this week that Goodrich will remain on as CEO of Gaylor while simultaneously serving as Commerce Secretary. Gaylor already has active contracts with the state, promising millions of dollars in investment in jobs in exchange for tax credits, and Goodrich says the firm will continue to compete for state economic development incentives even while he leads the state agency that administers them. And all of this is happening at the same time the governor announced the end to race and sex-based contracting preferences in the state's business diversity program. Democratic Senator Shelley Yoder characterizing the new quote-unquote merit-based system as, quote, a VIP entrance for the wealthy. I don't know, Alan. Like, I could be wrong, but this looks like corrupt self-dealing to me.
Yeah, there's corrupt self-dealing is one way to put it. Fox guarding the hen house, Fox harvesting the eggs, and why are we suddenly getting half of our eggs that we usually get? It's a pattern of just Mike Braun says like, oh, Indiana's open for business, and what he really
For his friends
is,
yes.
Well, yeah, what he's showing is that Indiana's up for the highest bidder or the most well-connected bidder. I will admit I didn't know until prepping for this that he had donated so heavily to Braun's campaign or the PACs that were bankrolling the Trump backed primary challenges. But it is deeply troubling that he's not recusing himself out of the private sector. I know in my job, my day job, my employers requested that I not say who I work for on political in a political venue.
And that's reasonable.
But yeah, it's pretty reasonable, and I through that process, like I have all sorts of ethics and compliance training that I had to do just as a routine part of the job. And then there's like a separate packet that if I win, I'm going to have to go through, very, very detailed conflict of interest training in order to maintain that distance. And it's kind of appalling that, like, I guess that doesn't matter if you're a utility company and getting a cabinet position in the state. But I'm not in that club, so I have to do all of the maintain the professional distance and avoid the appearance of impropriety, I think is the technical threshold there.
It's like Indiana's little Epstein Jr. class,
Oh my God. It's kind of troubling that they want to be that way. I did want to say something real quick about the preferential contracts, just because we always see this as like the end to preferential treatment for these groups that have been marginalized out of the community. It's been in my parents' lifetime that women were allowed to open their own bank accounts. Okay, so we're trying to kind of erase a little bit of that head start that a man would have in the economic field of business owners. Like, if you can't even open your own bank account, how are you going to start a business? And it's okay, my dad started this business back in 1920 and I've been running it since 1970, and now my son's taking over. And the preferential contracting towards women-owned business is trying to get out of that, and we see the same thing with the it's not even 175 years ago that white people were legally allowed to own black people. So where's that head start that we get, as white people? Like, we have that much of a head start economically. And so these programs to try to steer business towards minority and women-owned businesses is just really trying to level the playing field. And seeing them get rid of these and then call it merit-based and then hire their friends is a pattern that we see repeating at every level.
And calling it discriminatory, and I mean, we're
anti-white racism, right?
To your point, Alan, I mean, redlining was actively being engaged in against Black communities until the 60s, 70s, possibly even later than that. My
uncle was telling me about kind of redlining light when he bought his house in 2005, having a realtor make a comment about the right kind of neighborhood.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So now it's more in the language. It's not like legalized, but you still find that those conversations are happening. And so again, it's just about giving people a leg up in their ability to engage in business. And then I actually saw a clip of Todd Rokita calling the program discriminatory.
Right.
And he called it discriminatory against Black people because they couldn't prove they couldn't prove themselves, essentially. It was, I might have to try to find the clip and send it to you.
These people twist themselves in knots, right?
It was absolutely insane.
Just for like an objective measure, Sharon, I've met you in person. I know that I'm at least a foot taller than you. Well, it's, you and I have different, if I want to get something off the top shelf of my bookshelf here, I can just reach up and get it, but you need to go get a step stool. And it's not your fault that you don't have this foot head start towards the top shelf.
Well,
but people are calling.
I love that.
Yeah,
like, are step stools discriminatory against tall people?
I want to sort of debunk part of this thing because these folks like Rokita, they always tout merit based. They say, right, as if the women owned and the minority owned businesses are somehow not as good as the their friends' businesses. Let's be honest about it, and that we're somehow giving folks that wouldn't deserve or aren't as good of providers and wouldn't do as good a job, that we're giving them some sort of leg up just because they are women or minority owned business, when really in the entire point of this whole thing is to make sure we are looking at equally qualified businesses across the board and not just giving contracts to well-connected individuals like Chuck Goodrich. We've got about 20 minutes left, so I've got to move on. And, we just discussed what funneling state resources looks like, to political allies. Let's continue to look at the misallocation of public funds. So, due to Trump's One Big Beautiful Bill passed last year, as well as this year's Senate Enrolled Act 1 from the state legislature, Indiana's SNAP enrollment has dropped nearly 14%. This program serves as a lifeline, providing nutritional assistance to low-income households, but narrowed eligibility requirements and additional paperwork hurdles are now keeping needy Hoosiers hungry. One local public health official warned, quote, neither local government nor charitable food assistance is going to be able to offset the reduction in benefits. Particularly affected, children. And the falling SNAP and Medicaid enrollment has knock-on effects. Free school meals are at risk for nearly 650,000 Hoosier students, as SNAP enrollment is used as a benchmark for the community eligibility provision, which gives schools access to free breakfast and lunch for all students with no additional paperwork. And the state announced this week it will not participate in the Sunbucks summer food program in 2027. Indiana has already opted out this year and last, foregoing federal money that kept over 650,000 Hoosier children fed during the summer of 2024, the last year we participated. All of this comes the same week the state announced it is sitting on nearly $4 billion in cash reserves, with that number expected to grow to over $5 billion next year. Governor Braun touts this as a sign of the state's fiscal strength, but Sharon, I would suggest sitting on billions of dollars while children go hungry is a sign of moral weakness.
It's a sign of bullshit is what it is. I actually have a good friend of mine up here in Fort Wayne who runs an organization called Blessings in a Backpack. It's an amazing organization that she feeds, or the organization feeds kids every single weekend, allows kids to have a bag of food to take home every single weekend, so that way they are fed. And the way that my friend runs this program is she and her team have done the research on what foods are going to be foods that kiddos can eat without needing a microwave, without needing an oven, without needing refrigeration. So that way, if a kiddo doesn't have power at home, isn't tall enough to reach the microwave, all of these different things, that kiddo can still eat. And it is just moral weakness is not a strong enough. I don't feel like it's a strong enough way to say this. It is just an absolute. It's abysmal. It's abysmal
depravity. I would say
it goes back to the cruelty is the point. I, as someone who, like I said, this is one of my best friends, and seeing what she goes through to get enough funding for the program, seeing all the events that she puts on, seeing the different people that she interacts with. And so she's out there working as hard as she can. And these programs could have helped supplement that. And the decision not to participate in Sunbucks, the money is there for Sunbucks. The only thing that Indiana has to do is approve the program and pay the administrative costs. The fact that we are denying our kids in Indiana a program that would feed them over the summer for administrative costs, not the cost of the food, is absolute insanity.
And they can't say we don't have the money. We're sitting on $4 billion. You know, yeah. Sharon, your friend is out there doing heroic work. She shouldn't have to. Alan, we have the resources. We're not allocating them properly. We should be spending that $4 billion. Not all of it, you know, you need a little bit of a rainy day fund, sure, but that is money that should be spent on public services. Why do we even have government if not to take care of each other?
Right, and I think that's a big disconnect that a lot of people have. Just, you know, you hit the nail on the head. Why do we even have government if not for the common good? Whereas a lot of people look at like, oh, these, taxation is theft, and why should my tax dollars pay for this? And they don't understand that, we're all in this together, and particularly with childhood food assistance programs, the long-term economic benefits of funding these programs is almost 2 to 1. For every dollar that we put into early childhood nutrition, we get, I think, $1.80 back in economic
positive return on investment.
Yeah, and the audacity to say that we're a Christian nation or founded on Christian principles, and then turn around and cut funding for school meals. Whatever you do to the least of me, you do to me, is the Christianity that I was raised with. And it's really telling that we have all these people, and like our lieutenant governor is a pastor. and he's on board with cutting funding for SNAP. And even on a more high altitude view of it, SNAP ultimately was a farm assistance program, because where's the food come from? It comes from the farmers. When people are too broke to buy food, the farmers don't have income. And so we've got that aspect of it on top of, like, just feed the kids. especially when the money's there.
Right.
You know,
did Jesus do means testing when he brought forth the bread and the fish? I don't think like fill out this form. I
not
need
in the Bible I read.
references. It's insane. You know, to your point, Alan, these folks claim to be the world's biggest Christians, but then don't follow the teachings of Jesus. They don't take care of the least of these. I always like to say that they read the first part of the book. They got through Exodus. They saw all the smiting, right, and then got bored and fast forward and skipped to the end and read Revelations, and they missed all the good Jesus take care of the sick.
They
and
might have read Leviticus too. Leviticus is pretty intense.
Well, that's the first half. That's Leviticus is still Old Testament.
Oh, it's all the punishment and the weird stuff, and none of the loving each other. It's.
I mean, if they had even made it
totally
to the David stories, they would have seen stuff about loving each other. So,
and there's a biblical basis for communism in Acts.
Right?
So if you want to get into we're a Christian nation, hello, comrade.
Jesus and his disciples held their goods in common, right? I mean, Jesus said, a rich man cannot pass into heaven but through the eye of a needle or something. Like it, we've. If you read the Bible literally, and they always say they like to read the Bible literally, Jesus, big socialist. So
sell all your possessions and give it to the poor. That's
exactly. This prosperity gospel is a bastardization of
we could have a whole other 2-hour podcast on the prosperity gospel warping.
Mm-hmm.
We should, but that's way off in the weeds.
Folks who are love talk about religion and politics and their intersection. Anything on Axis, Moody Media, Straight White American Jesus. Those guys do great work. But let's move on to our last story this week. So the House of Representatives, and this has not become a law yet, but the House passed this week the Sunshine Protection Act, which would make daylight savings time permanent nationwide. President Trump has publicly pushed for passage, calling the biannual clock change ridiculous and framing it as a political win for Republicans. This was tried and failed in the 1970s, and passage does look iffy in the Senate. Why? Because parts of the country wouldn't see the sunrise until 10 a.m., while the earliest sunset in Indianapolis would be pushed back to 6:20 p.m., the latest sunrise wouldn't occur until 9:06 a.m., leaving children walking to school or waiting for the bus in pre-dawn darkness. Indiana is notably absent from the 19 states that have already passed contingent legislation to adopt permanent daylight savings time if Congress acts, meaning we would default to observing whatever Congress mandates unless the state legislature acts separately. Alan, what do you think about this?
Well, I do think we need to get rid of changing the clocks twice a year. I'm 100% on board with not doing that anymore. The pain in the butt factor is high on it before you even get into the real world consequences of economic productivity lost, but
and health
permanent
problems.
Well, yeah, and health it's I think an extra 20,000 deaths from cardiac events in those 2 weeks of the year. That might be all causes. I'm not entirely certain. I'd have please don't fact check me live on
car
that.
accidents and other things. Yeah, and those times it messes up your circadian rhythms. Yeah.
Yeah. But on top of that, the economic loss that we see, but permanent winter time is, that's the way that it needs to be implemented. And I really like the idea of, here, get your extra hour back in the fall and you get to keep it, right? I want my extra hour of sleep. Or do I have that backwards?
Spring forward, fall back. Yeah, fall back is when you get your extra.
Yeah, fall back is when you get the hour. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So
Sharon.
Oh, sorry.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, like, regardless of what outcome it is, like, we do need to look at whether Indiana needs to stay on Eastern time. Just geographically speaking, we're Central time. Like, we're that far back. You know, I had it pulled up. I was actually talking to Sharon last night about it. You know, when our solar noon is, and you know, at the height of the summer, what's today's solar noon is 1:51 p.m. So we got solar noon at almost 2 o'clock. So we're almost 2 hours ahead of the sun right now, and that's with our spring forward an hour and our hour up on Eastern time. So, you know, do we stay the hour behind and stay on Eastern time? Do we stay the hour behind and then also go back to Central time? Because that would put our earliest solar noon at like 11:30 and our latest solar noon at 11:50, and you know, that's a conversation that I'm very willing to have. You know, God willing,
I think
on the floor of the
you're
State
getting
House.
at where I wanted to land. I think, and Sharon, I don't know if you agree with us, but I think if you're going to do this, you do permanent standard time, and you put Indiana on Central. And you know, if you look at that map right there, and you click on it in the show notes or whatever, that'll kind of show you where you belong. And you know, with the what solar noon or whatever you were saying it is, there's
a reason standard time was
right.
Standard time. There is just a reason, like the fact. So we have a place up here in Fort Wayne called Science Central, and there's a sundial outside of Science Central. And I haven't seen it. I haven't looked at it in a while, but I have to imagine that there's good parts of the year where it is not at all accurate. There was a reason why sundials were kind of the standard of telling time for centuries before we had clocks. It's because the sun does appear and disappear on a very fixed schedule. I have thought ever since, I was in college when they made the change to having us change our clocks. I was quite annoyed. I was already in my 20s. And I just I remember how hard it was the first few years, and it's not gotten any easier. But I remember thinking as far back as my very first election that I voted in, that we should have been on Central time, especially when there's actually pretty significant parts of our state that are on Central time on the west side of the state.
Yeah, and I grew up in that part of the state. I'm from Northwest Indiana originally. Central time feels normal to me. Everything starts so late around here.
A large part of that is just economic alignment, because their economic environment is more in Illinois. So like that's you know, when you're if you live in the Chicago suburbs in northwestern Indiana, well, it doesn't make sense to be on Eastern time and then have to adjust your clock on your way to and from work. But not to mention that you got trains up there that run between the two areas. It makes it a lot easier when everybody's on the same time in that regard. So hey, we have to wrap things up here. Where can folks find out more about you guys, your campaigns, connect with you online on social media and whatnot? Alan, I'll start with you. So my website is millerfor73.com. That's MILLERFOR73.com. I'm on Facebook as Alan Miller for State Representative. And then I'm on Instagram and Threads at electalanmiller. You can also email me. It's electalanmiller@proton.me. So any of those will get to me. And then I try to be out and about around the community. The blessing here has been that running for office has kind of forced me to stay up on the community calendar, and so I'm not missing events as much as I have in the past.
Well, very good. So folks, be sure to find Alan out there in the community and bring some sunblock for this poor guy. Sharon,
the worst
how about you? Where can folks find you on the interwebs?
So I did just do the Recovering Republicans. So that podcast came out yesterday. I am going to be next week in Fort Wayne. We have Fort Wayne Pride, which is one of, if not still the biggest pride in Indiana. It was the first pride in Indiana. And I will get to be on the Maine Pride stage during the drag show next Saturday evening. I am so excited about that. I am at www.electsharonwight. That's WIGHT.com, as well as on Facebook at it is facebook.com/electsharonwight. You can reach me via email, electsharonwight@gmail.com. And I do have an Instagram, but it's not functioning at the moment. So hit me up on those other places. Or if you're in the Fort Wayne area, come to Pride next Saturday, and I'll be there all day and then on the Pride stage that evening.
Fantastic. And of course, folks, you can find me on Blue Sky, Instagram, and Threads at whosleft.us, and on Facebook, TikTok, and YouTube at Who's Left. Send me a DM with feedback or email me at scott@whosleft.us. And we can't do all of this without you. Please support our work with a paid subscription at progressiveindiana.net and follow Progressive Indiana Network on social media at the full spelled out name on most sites, but on Blue Sky and TikTok, we're at PIN Indiana. Please help us grow with a follow wherever you're at. Once again, thanks to Sharon Wight and Alan Miller for joining us today. Thank you for watching or listening. Donate and volunteer for our candidates if you can. Like, share, comment, and leave a review for us. Let us keep building a radically democratic Indiana together. Until next time, I am Scott Aaron Rogers signing off from Bloomington. Love each other, Indiana.